Yeah, if you say things, hi everybody, we're doing the 13.5 video. Yes, if you talk, you are forever in infamy all over my videos. So you're like, so okay, as we were talking about, we've been dealing with the sine function, but we're going to go up to the cosine function. Here's what the cool thing is about this. Cosine function. We are still going to be dealing with the amplitude, or the a value. It's going to be in the same place, right in front. We are still going to be dealing with the period. Now, the period itself isn't our b value. To find the period, we do 2 pi over b, but the b is telling us, how many times our cycle will complete in there. So, same place to find it. So, when I go looking for this stuff, what's the period of the cosine function? Okay. My b value is 1/4. So, 2 pi divided by 1/4. Now, I could go to the calculator here, but I'm not going to. And here's why. This is going to lead us into when we're actually doing this calculation to be able to do it for our graphs. We talked about you take the b value and you multiply by its reciprocal, by its flip. So we're going to do 2 pi times flip my 1/4 and get my answer. Now, could I plug that part into my calculator and then put the pi back on and get 8 pi? Sure. Sure could. But not really necessary. Same thing here. My b value is 2. Or 2 over 1. So, my period is 2 pi times the flip of this. Multiply it across and simplify when I can. So you're like, that really is just basically the same thing as what we've been doing. And it is. There's not a darn thing that's different about it. So you're like, so something's got to be different, or we wouldn't call it cosine, we just call it sine, and that'd be true. So here comes where the difference comes in, and just a reminder of where these values come from. So we're going to flip over. We're going to go down to the bottom where the examples are. Okay, so examples, number 5. Let's see if this fits. Oh, like a glove. Okay, so we broke this out the other day when we were trying to do just the sine portion of things. And I use this because I was saying, I want you to kind of see at least where it comes from. You don't have to memorize where it comes from, but when you're in a trig class, you'd look at it more this way. And we looked about how if I took a circle and I cut it into 90-degree parts, which is what this is, and I just wrote the coordinates. So like if this is my origin, and I go right 1, the x value goes up 1. If I go up 1, the y value goes up 1. And if I go left 1, the x value is negative. If I go down, the y value is negative. And we said how all of the second values, the y values, were my sine values. So 0, 1, 0, negative 1, back to 0. Well, guess what? Now, your cosine values can come from those same coordinate points. It's just the x value. C comes before s. That's how I remember. So at 0, my cosine is 1. At pi over 2, it's 0. At pi, it's negative 1. At 3 pi over 2, it's 0. And then back around again. So reminder, because I want to kind of make a comparison here. This, okay, and I don't mind in a bit, I'll put it up on freeze on the screen if you want to make a little note of it, a note card, whatever. But when it comes to Friday, when we quiz this, I never should put date on things, and I just did. So if this is another year and it's not Friday, ignore what I just said. You'll have this to work with, but I'm not giving you these. So whether you need to make a circle and kind of create like this, or you're just going to remember, hey, sine starts with 0, cosine starts with 1, and work it from there. I don't care, but you have to know that part. Otherwise, your graphs are basically probably going to be blank because you're going to be like, oh, what here? So we need to start working on that part. So if it kind of helps for you to have this all in one spot, kind of as you're working with it and you're doing practice problems and you're writing them again, go ahead. But I'm just making it clear, this is not the version we will be using on the quiz. This is. Okay. So with that in mind, I take a peek down here and I go, all right, so what have I got and what am I going to be using that for? So I've got my A value is -3. I've got my B value is 2. So what's that going to tell me? Well, if I decide I'm going to make my own little chart over here. These never change. No matter if they're sine or cosine, it doesn't matter. And that's what we have in our little kind of salmon colored sheet there. So I can always write those down first. And then again, my newly found cosine values. Oops, am I going to have to move this up, ain't I? There we go. And I get those in there. That's always my starting point. So now, what are we going to do? Well, I have no idea who this person is. And so now, I'm going to look at them and go, okay, the A value, that has to do with my cosine values. So since my A is -3, I'm going to multiply all of these by -3. Oops, back on the screen here. Now, if you can just do that in your head, that's cool. If you're more visual, which is kind of the way I'm going here, we'll multiply this out. And the values that I get out of there will be the values that I'm going to use. Now, if I have a B value, that I'm going to do here, but we're always going to multiply by the inverse of B. And so the way I always write that is I say I'm going to multiply by 1 over B, but in this case, that means I'm going to multiply by 1 over 2. Take the fraction and flip it, or if it's not a fraction, make it a fraction and then flip it. So we're going to multiply all of these by 1 over 2. And whatever I get out for these, again, I'm going straight across, so pi times 1 is pi, 2 times 2 is 4. Pi times 1 is pi. There's only a 2 in the denominator, so I got to leave that. 3 times 1 would be 3 pi. 2 times 2 is 4. And then here comes the big one. 2 pi times 1 is 2 pi. Over 2 is pi. You're like, why is that the big one? Because normally, which I seem to have forgotten to do here, I would figure out my period right away, 2 pi over b. And what should always happen is that my last value in here and my period need to be the same. If they're not, my math went wrong somewhere. So now I've got my angle measures to go along here and these values. So, start at 0. Pi over 4, pi over 2. Nice thing is, on the quiz preview and the quiz, I left you more of blank ones like this. Instead of having all the numbers there, I'm finding that's getting to be a little bit of a pain. So, trying to make that better. And then -3 and +3 are going to be my maximum and my minimum values. So at that point now, I'm just going to use the chart and plot my points. 0, -3. pi over 4 is 0. Pi over 2, 3. 3 pi over 4 is 0. And pi negative 3. And this actually is a flipped over cosine graph. We're going to take a look at a couple more examples from the worksheet. But with these, typically they're going to look like a big old U. This one looks more like a hill. So, but that's how these are going to work. Not that much different from what we've been doing with the sine graph. But I'm going to say it, and I sound like a broken record all the time, and I'm told as such. If you just sit there and do the ones we do, and you're like, yep, the quiz will be a disaster. I'm not going to lie. Just writing these values down like we are and working with them over and over is going to be something that's useful. Okay, it's going to get you used to the numbers and used to just doing this period. But I can only give advice. Okay, I will get this back in a minute if we need it. I'm going to jump over to the worksheet here for a second. And I want to do one off of each page, but I'm going to start on the last page and work my way forward. So we're going to start here. We're actually going to start with the one in the middle. This y at cosine equals 0.5x. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite that. Because I think that's going to be easier for us to work with, is the fraction here. So I look, and I'm like, okay, I don't see a number in front of cosine this time. So if I want to, I could say it's 1. But what I'm interested in here is that my b value is a half. So my period is going to be 2 pi times the flip of that. So when I go to make my chart here in a second, that last value that I get in the first column better be 4 pi or I'm in a little bit of trouble. Okay, there is a bit of good news. Since my a value is 1, or that I don't see 1 here, none of these values are going to change. So that part's done. Now, as far as my other part goes, Dandy help sheet back out here. And remember, just like I did here, all I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through and I'm going to multiply through here by the inverse, by the flip of my fraction. So 0 times 2 is 0. Pi times 2 would be 2 pi divided by 2 is pi. Pi times 2 is 2 pi. 3 times 2 is 6, so 6 pi divided by 2 is 3 pi. And 2 pi times 2 is 4 pi. Bingo! Got the right number. Feeling good. Now the unfortunate thing about the graphs I have here is they weren't ready for a period change. So, we're going to have to make some adjustments here. So my 0 is good. This is just going to be pi, so we'll get rid of the fraction. And it's going to be 2 pi. Okay, we're doing good so far. And that's going to be 3 pi. And this one we just got to change. Like I said, that's why on the preview and on the quiz, you're just going to have blank ones you can do what you'd like with. So I go through, I'm going to assume that we're just going to call these 1 and negative 1. Now we just plot them. 0, 1. Pi, 0. 2 pi, negative 1. 3 pi, 0. And 4 pi is back to 1. And this is more of your classic cosine graph. Kind of that U shape. But again, all I had to do, I get these given to me, multiply by the flip of b. And I didn't even have a cosine value to do this time. We will on the next one, though. So, let's see here. I think on the page before this, I'm pretty sure that's where it is. Yep. We're going to have us... Actually, let's do the middle one again. Let's just stick with the middles. So this time I look. See, my a value is -4. My b value is 1. There's nothing there. So my period is just going to be 2 pi. Well, that's nice. These are already labeled for me now. How convenient. Excuse me. So we know these aren't going to change at all because dividing by 1 doesn't change anything. So this part is done. My cosine part, though, and again, the more I keep writing these, the more apt I am that I'm going to have this locked in. We're always going to multiply by the a value. So here, we're going to multiply all of these by -4. And just that quick, I'm ready to go. So these are going to be my angle measures. So -4, pi over 2 is 0. Pi is going to be 4. Oops, almost went to 3. 3 pi over 2 is 0. And 2 pi is -4. And again, with that -a, it just flips my graph over. Now it looks more like a, I don't know, girl with pigtails, a hat, a hill, whatever you want to call it. So, if it's just the amplitude that changes, that'll look a little bit different like that. And now we'll do one more where we kind of hit everything. So, we'll just go back up to the top here. We'll do the first one. Then I will get out the way. So this time, we have an a change. We have a b change. B is 2 over 1. We multiply by the inverse. Okay, we just flip it. And I know my period. Okay, so I know that last value in my chart has got to be pi. Otherwise, something didn't go well. Okay. We know what we start with, or at least we're working towards getting to know what we start with. Still got a couple days to play with here. And I look and I go, okay, now this time, I've got an a value. So we're going to multiply all the cosine values by 4. And then over here, since my b value is 2, we're going to multiply by that reciprocal. Multiply them all by a half. While keeping in the back of our mind, as we multiply across, when we get to the end, we know what we better get, or something's not good. 2 pi over 2 is pi. And again, whenever we do quizzes in here, they're never so long that you don't have the time to do this. You'll have plenty of time to be able to do that if you're a chart type person. And that's okay. That's a good thing. So 0, 4. Pi over 4 is 0, so we got to change this one. Okay, pi over 2, -4. 3 pi over 4, back to 0. And pi back up to 4. And get my graph. So you've got a couple of each type here to kind of keep playing with, but more importantly, to get used to those sine and cosine values that we put in this side of the chart. So when we get there, it's just doing some multiplying and plotting some points. Shoot, this is easy. I can do this. So try some of those out. The key is up front. Tomorrow we'll do kind of a review where we mix cosine and sine together, kind of make sure we got this down, then we're ready to roll at the end of the week here. So